I decided for this build, I want to show you guys how you can build a really cool looking board with just standard cedar deck boards from Home Depot, because they're pretty inexpensive and readily available for most people. If you do go to your local lumber yard, you're very likely going to get a better customer experience from their knowledgeable staff, and they're going to have higher quality selection of wood species. They also might have reasonably priced milling services if you don't have a table saw, and you could walk out the door with all of your strips pre-cut for you. The paddleboard I'm building is 11 foot 8 inches long, so I'm picking from the pile of 12 foot long 2x6 cedar deck boards. I calculated that I can get about 14 1/4 inch strips out of each board at a width of 1 3/4 inch wide. So I need 3 total deck boards to cover the top and bottom of my board. I spent some time sifting through the stack to find the boards that were the most straight, least damaged, and had consistent wood grain. This is not clear grade cedar, so I will be dealing with some knot holes, but I'm okay with that. Each of these boards was about $25. Once you get home and unload your lumber, you'll want to get an in-feed and out-feed system set up around your table saw. I'm using a combination of some sawhorses and this multifunction shaping stand table that I constructed my frame kit on. So I did mill these strips right before gluing my frame together. Next, I like to make a couple additions to my table saw to make the milling process a little bit easier. First, I added this really helpful adjustable thin strip jig that I bought on Amazon. It's basically just a spring-loaded wheel that applies pressure to your lumber before it contacts the blade. It's sort of like having an extra set of hands, which is helpful for managing these long, cumbersome boards. I also applied some tape to both sides of my table saw blade just to prevent my thin strips from falling in or getting caught up. And lastly, I'm using a rip saw blade, which is probably the most important tip here. There are fewer teeth on a rip saw blade and larger gullets, which together helps remove the stock faster and smoother when cutting lengthwise with the grain direction. When milling the strips, let the saw do the work and push your boards through as smoothly as possible. This takes quite a few reps and you will create a ton of dust. I milled half of my material down to 1/4 inch strips, which will cover the top deck of my paddleboard, and the other half of my material down to 3/16 inch thick strips for the bottom side. Since the bottom of your paddleboard does not need to support the weight of the paddler, it's worth cutting those strips a little thinner to make your board significantly lighter weight in the end. Also, I ended up milling a few strips of paulownia lumber and walnut to create a contrasting accent strip down the middle of my board, but I didn't record that on video, unfortunately. But it was done using the same process to get my strips to their final thickness. And in the next video, I'll show you how to glue these strips to the bottom side of your frame kit.